Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I told you guys I'm trying to get a CRA on this show for the longest time, and this week and next week, hopefully I have three total, but right now is the first one. Her name is Tiffany Bennett, right? She's a former CRA that now is running her own SMO. But up until as recently as last year, 2014, Tiffany was a CRA. So we're going to get into some of the pain points of being a CRA, what a typical day is like, what a typical week is like, what kind of technology do they use, what are some of their common issues with sites, all that kind of stuff. And Tiffany, it's actually better that you're not a CRA now because you could speak more honestly about what's actually going on, right?
Right.
So welcome to the show. Thank you very much. We will not mention what company you worked for, but it was a large CRO, right?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes. So let's get right into it. I mean, first of all, how long were you a CRA for?
I've been monitoring or was monitoring for close to 6 years
Okay, 6 years.
as a
And
CRA.
was it always for the same company, or did you move around different companies?
Oh no, I worked for a bunch of different major CROs. Can I mention them or
Yeah,
no?
if you
I
want.
don't know if
Yeah,
you.
if you want to. It's all
Um,
right.
well, yeah, everyone knows about Quintiles, and I've worked for PRA, and I've had employment with Icon. Those are some of the major CROs out there.
Okay. And that's actually good because it gives us a larger, I guess, sample size of CROs because some CRAs that I know only worked for one CRO their whole life. So you've actually jumped around a bit so you're able to see different company cultures. Are they pretty much at the end of the day all the same or are they different in any ways?
I would say that, the cultures are pretty much the same, but when it comes down to the actual CRA work, the metric is what's most important, and that is like the same across all CROs. It comes down to your numbers, your days on site, and of course, your reports and your confirmation and follow-up letters. But everything is tracked. Every
Okay.
move you make. So
hmm And what are
that's
so what
probably
are
the most
your
common thing.
what are your numbers? Is it just days on site, or are they looking at specific things like queries or how your sites are enrolling, or what are they looking at?
Um, they're looking at, the site, your site's performance and how often you're out there monitoring. So a typical CRA would have to be on site anywhere from probably 8 to 10 days per month, and that's not including travel days,
Okay.
or 8 to 10 visits per month.
8 to 10 site visits
And
per month. Okay.
yes, and the frequency of you going to that site will depend on how many patients that site's actually enrolling.
Right. Okay.
So
So you
you may, and depending on the protocols that you're assigned to, you may have more visits, you may have less. But the goal is to have each CRA on site, 8 to 10 visits a month.
And can you choose what type of studies you want to work on? Like, let's say you want to work on oncology trials. Can you choose that, or are you pretty much just given your assignments?
You're pretty much given your assignments, but I know that some CRAs are qualified or have a lot of experience in a specific area, and so they may just be hired just for that, or they may be hired to do multiple studies. And in an ideal world, you'd be able to choose your studies, but typically no.
Okay. Typically no. So let's get into the pain points because I want to keep this interview under 15 minutes. So let's get to the pain points. What are some of the, first of all, internally, okay, just between you and your employer, what are some of the pain points? And then we're going to get into your pain points with the research sites. But let's go with you and the CRO. What are some things that were just like really annoying that you had to deal with, or things that were like really inefficient that you had to maneuver around between you and your CRO?
Well, you know what? Honestly, and this kind of happens, and I don't know if this happens often, but in regards to, okay, so every CRA has a line manager and they have, a project manager. Your line manager kind of helps you stay on top of your tasks. You submit your timesheet to them and your expense reports get signed off and report. But sometimes one of my pain points is that sometimes the managers they've never been CRAs before. And so they have certain expectations that can become somewhat unrealistic just because they don't understand the nature and the details of what it takes to be a CRA. And so sometimes the expectations are just a little bit more, unreasonable because they've never been through it before.
That's interesting. I always thought they promoted project managers from CRAs, but you're telling me that that's not the case?
Sometimes it is. Most times they are promoted from within. You do move to a CRA, to a project manager, but sometimes, every once in a while, and this happened to me a couple times. I've had managers who somehow, one way or another, I found out that, they came from another area or they had a different background, but they haven't actually been a CRA. And having a manager that has the perspective of a CRA, but is your manager, is beneficial to the CRA because you're dealing with someone who actually gets it, as opposed to dealing with someone who, maybe comparing your work to the next person's work and doesn't exactly have their own opinions or point of view as to what it takes to be a good CRA.
Yeah, okay.
So just sometimes that can be frustrating, just the lack of knowledge.
And how did you guys communicate or collaborate with colleagues? Did you guys have like virtual workspaces, like Intralinks, or did you guys have your own platforms that you used?
So the CROs, we have our own internal intranet, and you log in and you have access to all the systems, all the EDC systems, all the CTMS systems, everything that you need for the study, and as well as your onboarding and all your training. And anyone who's going to CRA knows that there is at least anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to a month of just reading standard operating procedures and your protocols and getting familiar. All of that is on the internet. And we also sometimes have instant messenger.
Oh, you guys use instant messenger?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some sort of instant messenger. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was your own version of instant messenger that the CRO created specifically for those tasks, right? For collaborating.
Right.
Okay. And any other pain points dealing with the actual CRO?
I would probably say that, I think anywhere from 2 to 3 protocols is manageable. And I think that some CROs are getting away from this, but 2 to 3 protocols is manageable. And sometimes you have CROs that like to, assign you to a lot of studies. And when it comes to retaining the information that you actually need and to be able to do your job the way that they expect you to do it, it's difficult having a lot of protocols on your mind. So when I feel like the more experience you have with this type of work, the more protocols they think that, the more protocols you're able to handle, and that's not necessarily true.
Okay.
You would think that, but you still have to execute that protocol in an efficient way. And sometimes when it comes to having what I call a protocol overload, you can't perform on protocols the way that you need to simply because you can't retain that much information. Mm-hmm. And especially, I can imagine, I've never worked in oncology, but oncology is a whole different world when it comes to clinical trials. So I can imagine that for some of the oncology monitors that, the data can be, a lot to take in and a lot to do, especially if you're new to the site or new to the company.
Right. Now, you were a CRA until 2014, so were you around for any remote monitoring kind of stuff?
No, I wasn't, but I am hearing more and more about it. I think that's that's probably the future of the monitor, is the remote monitoring and keeping things more central. I do recall a friend of mine at the CRA. She actually was looking for a position, and all of her sites were within driving distance.
Okay.
Like no plane. Yeah, like so she goes home and comes right back.
And that's rare because usually they had you going all over the place, right?
Exactly, and that's rare. Now this is in LA, so I think it just depends on geographically where you are and if you're able to do that. But it looks like the way that it's set up, she just does the monitoring on site, and then she also does some remote monitoring as well.
Mm-hmm. And then what about pain points with the sites? So we talked about the CRO. So what were some of the biggest issues that you had to deal with that were kind of troublesome or kind of difficult to deal with when it came to managing your sites or monitoring your sites?
I think one of my biggest pain points was probably the PI not being available when they know that I'm coming.
So how common is that? How because I hear this all the time. How I see it at my sites too. We're no different.
Yeah.
So how often or how common is this problem?
Well, I think it's common for doctors who, I mean, I don't know. It just kind of depends on the availability of the doctor. I mean, it's pretty common. It's not ideal because you want to make sure that the PI is overseeing the trial the way that they need to, and you want them to be there for that and and your meeting. So it happens more often than you think, but it's an issue because as a monitor you want to be able to fix whatever's not working, and the coordinator is one person, but the overall person who's responsible for everything, you want to be able to communicate that with them as it's happening and not have to, think about what happened while you were on site with the follow-up phone call. I mean, you can take your notes and all those things, but nothing's better than a face-to-face conversation about what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And when we say this is a common issue, what are we talking about? The PI is only there for 5 minutes, or the PI is not there at all?
Well, 5 minutes is better than not being there at all.
And which ones have you seen more of?
Huh?
I said, which ones have you seen more of during your experiences? Them just not being there at all, or just in and out for a quick 5 minutes?
Probably, probably just 5 minutes.
Okay, so that was more common. All right.
Yeah.
So other than the PI oversight, I mean, what about like keeping on top of your coordinators for sending you logs? Did you have to constantly nag them about these kind of things, or?
Yeah, following up with the sites, making sure that they resolve all the follow-up items from the previous visit and not entering their data timely.
Not entering data timely. Okay.
Yeah, because, we have to review the data before we go out there, and if I have to call and tell the site to put it in there, I mean, I don't know what would, there's been cases where I've, gone to sites and they haven't entered the data, and I think there was a time where I was printing reports, and, as being a CRA, you got so many responsibilities and so many things to do, you just assume that sometimes this work is done, and sometimes it isn't. It doesn't happen often, but it happens a lot with like some of the more inexperienced sites.
Okay, and I have 4 quick questions for you from a viewer. Okay, specifically wanted me to ask you. So this is someone who wants to be a CRA. So she's asking, what are some things you would do before visiting a site? And you just mentioned you're gonna check the EDC to make sure there's some data being entered, right?
Yes. So before going on site, you want to see if the data is entered. You want to check your follow-up letters from the previous visit to make sure that you have a list of things that they need to be resolved, that you need to resolve when you get there. And you can communicate this with your study coordinator before getting there. Drug reports, IP inventory, make sure that the drug is registered. And sometimes, depending on the system, you can run your own analysis at the site as to how many subjects they screen, how many are enrolled, how many are discontinued, how many are screening failed, and also the drug inventory. You can't actually check it until you get there, but if it's an initial shipment, you'd be able to tell from the systems that you have access to.
Okay. Question 2, and we kind of talked about this. So, what questions do you ask the PI at the site visit if you're lucky enough to see him or her, right?
Yes. Well, you just want to ask the PI how are things going, the status of their patients. If you have identified any patients that you're concerned about or had questions about, you would ask specifically about that patient. The role of the PI is to make sure that everything is going smoothly according to protocol, and that they're monitoring the safety and making sure that this patient or the subject are okay. So you just need to get an assessment after the work that you've done. Get an assessment of what you see, and if there's any discrepancies or anything that you are questioning or have questions about, those are the things you want to ask him.
Okay, and the last 2, I can combine them into one. So, question 3 is things to look out for at a research site, which is pretty vague, but we can combine it with question 4. What are the most common mistakes you find at a research site?
Some of the most common mistakes, probably incomplete source documents and incomplete regulatory binder.
So
people don't realize that, the regulatory binder is an ongoing thing. Besides with the protocol, the investigators for sure, and all the things that in ICF, you may have a new ICF that was approved, and you don't have the latest ICF in your binder, or you may have a new protocol amendment. You have the original protocol, but you don't have the amended protocol. You know what I mean? Site signature delegation law. People, performing on the study and not documenting what their real responsibilities are, or even training sometimes is not documented.
Right.
So yeah, those are just some of the things.
Okay. And I guess with remote monitoring, I mean, there's probably ways for monitors to become more proactive with that if they were to use a virtual workspace or something like that. But we're not quite there yet, right?
No, I wouldn't. I think it's coming, but the CRA role is always changing, and things are always different and new because there's more and better and efficient ways to do things. For example, one of my friends who's a CRA, one of her onboarding, she's in the hiring process, and she already interviewed, but there's a module that she had to go through online prior to interviewing with the hiring manager. And depending on how you monitored on the module will determine if you got the job or not. So it's kind of like checking to see what kind of monitor you are before they hire you. So things like that are coming around.
So they're getting more sophisticated.
Excuse me? I'm sorry?
They're getting more sophisticated with the hiring methods.
Yes, more sophisticated because, there's a high turnover rate for CRAs out there because it's always new opportunities and new CROs and new pharmaceutical companies, or even old ones with new deals. So, it gets competitive with the more experience that you have.
Yeah, we got to do another one of these interviews later just about the hiring process because I get so many questions from people who want to be CRAs. So we got to spend another 15 minutes just on that. Okay.
Okay, sure.
We'll do that later. Good luck with your SMO. And by the way, how do you like that compared to being a CRA?
Oh, I like it. I like it much better because not that I have a problem with traveling, but for me, it just got to a point where I just kind of wanted to be in one place and do research. Mm-hmm. So, the fact that I'm able to still do what I normally do or similar to what I do and not have to be on a plane or in a car all the time is nice.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's riskier, like, setting up any business is a lot riskier than having a job, although that's becoming less true, but also the potential for profits is much greater there. So good luck with that, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it, and thank you everyone for listening/watching. This is Dan Sfera and Tiffany Bennett from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.